How many of you are acquainted with the movie The Nightmare Before Christmas? Yeah, okay, I figured as much, especially if you have little kids. Well, my daughter loves decorating for Christmas, and last year the whole family did The Wizard of Oz, had all the characters in our front yard, and this year is the night before Christmas, and so we need to dress accordingly. So this year I will be Oogie Boogie. So I got my outfit yesterday at Party City, and I didn't even know who Oogie Boogie was. I said, who is this person? And they told me, and I guess he's not a very nice guy in the movie. But anyway, that's what I'll be. All right, thanks, Brian, for those words. Brian and I have had several lunches together at In-N-Out. We both like In-N-Out, and that works for me at least. And I quickly realized, even at our first lunch, that he has a pastor's heart for all of you. And that's not always a given. It just isn't. But he cares deeply for all of you as his church family. And that's impressive. I love the creative things this church does. Wow. The car show, the Mental Health Sunday a few weeks ago I heard about, the 2 inserts on your programs. You guys do a lot of stuff, and it's really creative. Man, oh man. I want to encourage you to keep Brian and Mike and the pastors here in your prayers and their spouses, because these days of leading a church are really, really hard, primarily driven by the political divisiveness in our country. And they face challenges I never did as a pastor. And I've read all kinds of articles. In fact, I was reading an article yesterday from a reputable source that said nearly 50% of pastors are either planning to step out of ministry or are seriously considering it. These are tough days for leading a church. So please keep them in your prayers. October is Pastor's Appreciation Month, as you might know, so you might want to do that. You know, just an occasional word of thanks to them would probably mean more than you realize. People just assume pastors know that stuff, but I'm telling you, it's powerful. Just, hey, Pastor, thanks for what you do in leading our team. When I retired just about a year ago, my wife and I decided that we would visit churches, something we've never been able to do because I've always been a pastor. And so over the past, 8, 9 months, we visited over 20 different churches in San Marcos and Escondido, where we live. And it's been fascinating, all the different ways churches do church. And but I got to tell you that one of the best worship teams we've ever heard is yours. Really, I mean that. Yeah. Number of people, the quality. I love that Spanish ending. That was cool. But really, it's really one of the best I've experienced. Quick word about myself, in addition to what Brian mentioned. I grew up in Northern Illinois, graduated from college, attended seminary in Minneapolis. 46 years ago, I met the love and joy and delight of my life. About my Barbara, and man, we are still in love. We really are. Just one of the big benefits of retiring is I could spend more time with her, and that's what we've been doing. After graduating from seminary, we accepted an invitation to become the pastor at a church in the Chicago suburbs. And I felt that God was really leading us to that church because I am a diehard lifelong Cubs fan who play in Chicago. And I thought, that's got to be God, leading us to where I could go to Wrigley Field anytime I wanted. As Brian mentioned, we have 3 kids, 4 grandkids. After serving in Chicago for 8 years, we moved out here to Escondido, and I was privileged to serve as a pastor of Gateway Community Church, which met here in San Marcos and Restaurant Row for, 36 years that I was there. And 3 decades of being saturated with countless memories that I will cherish for the rest of my life. Last night we had a Gateway family reunion at my daughter's house, and a whole bunch of people were there, and it was just so good to see the folks again after not seeing several of them for quite some time. Mark and Maureen Loescher, who called this church your home, were faithful leaders in our church for most of those 36 years, and they continue to be close, lifelong, good friends of ours over here, Mark and Maureen. And two of my favorite all-time church kids from all those years, with a lot of kids in those churches, are two kids who call this place home, Katie and Michael. And it's always good to see Katie. We have a running joke, I call her Frank, but that's another story. So, all right. The title of my message this morning is The Hard Work of Waiting. We're often told that the two painful situations that we all have to go through in life are death and taxes. But let me add a third challenge to that, and that would be, of course, waiting. On the light side, it's waiting for the interminably long red light to change, waiting for rush hour, waiting to get through rush hour traffic, waiting for the weekend, waiting for your coffee fix, waiting for the microwave to finally ding, waiting for the prompts to finish before you can leave a voicemail, waiting for the bathroom scale to reward you for your dietary disciplines, waiting for potty training to be mercifully over, waiting to be able to actually sleep through the night. Some of you moms and dads know. Waiting for the election to be over, waiting for the Padres to finally dethrone the Dodgers. When my kids were small and starting school, I decided to do something a little different, and it became known as Hooky Day. This is how it worked. I just came up with the idea. When my first son started first grade, I thought I was going to take him on a Hooky Day. So one day in May, before I dropped him off at school, a few weeks left of school year, he was getting out of the car, and I said, wait a minute, where are you going? And I said, you're not going to school today. You're playing hooky with me. All day, your choice, whatever you want to do. I had to find dates on my calendar to do these hooky days. That was a challenge sometimes. But so he did his thing. And then I did it with my middle son, Ryan, and my daughter, Courtney. And we did it all the way through high school. And I drew the line at traveling to the college campus to do hooky days. I said, that's enough. Through high school is enough. Well, then my daughter had her daughter finish going to first grade last year. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it for Samantha. And so I drove her to school one day in May, and she was getting out of the car, and I did the whole deal. And so all day, we did whatever she wanted to do. And we did a bunch of stuff. We went down to the mall. And maybe you know there's a room down there where a store used to be where they have all kinds of really cool stuff for kids. Anybody been in that room? Okay, you pay for it, but it's worth it. We were probably there about 2 hours to doing stuff. Well, it's something to do, you know. And then she wanted to get a Cinnabon. We did that. And then she wanted to ride the train. Have you all seen that train that drives through the mall? Okay. Well, we went to the train. And we bought the tickets, climbed in there. We're the only ones on the train. There were like 5 or 6 cars. Nobody but us. It was a quiet day. And as soon as the train left, she had a burst of shyness. And so she laid down on her seat so nobody could see her. And so here I am, right? And that train is going all over the place. And people are looking at me and thinking, what is going on here? What's this guy has a thing with his train? And she didn't get up. She stayed down. I was tempted to lay down with her. And every time I thought, go over, headed back to the station, she'd take another loop. And I don't know how long that train went, 10, 15, it felt like it. And I was reminded of the hard work of waiting to get off this thing. Waiting can be incredibly hard. It really can. Nobody enjoys waiting. Let me offer a couple quizzes to see how you do how you grade out on waiting. You've been sitting in a doctor's office for a very long time. And what are your choices? You had 3 choices. You were grateful to catch up on a 2003 Reader's Digest. In an attempt to empty the room, you tell the other people that you have a highly contagious disease. Or option 3, you pretend to hyperventilate to get immediate attention. Okay, another scenario. How do you respond when you have to wait a long time in your favorite restaurant to get a table? Option 1, you're grateful for the chance to work up an appetite. 2, you tell the other diners that you're the new owner, so eat up and get out. Or you call in a bomb scare. Now, speaking of restaurants, you wait for a table. You wait for a menu. You wait for your food. And then you wait for the check. And the people who are serving you have the audacity to call themselves the waiters. Just doesn't seem right. But there are more serious times of waiting. The agonizing wait for a medical test that could dramatically alter the trajectory of your life or somebody you care about. The waiting of a childless couple for good news from a pregnancy test or an adoption clinic. The waiting of a life mate to come into your life. The waiting for a prodigal child to finally come to their senses. Waiting for guidance, going into an uncertain future. Waiting for a fractured friendship to heal. Waiting for someone you care about to come to faith in Jesus or to come back to the church. Waiting for a dark cloud of depression to finally dissipate. Waiting for even a microscopic hint that your prayers are beginning to gain a foothold, or waiting for the divisive issues in our country to finally show some small indication of moving toward a spirit of unity. I would guess all of us can think of somewhere in our life that we are waiting for something important, if nothing else, waiting for this message to end. Now, friends, you're going to get a lot more out of this message if you can think of at least one waiting room that you are currently in today. Just one. Don't try to juggle too many. What are you waiting for in your life? Got one? I hope so. True confession. I hate waiting. I detest waiting, a fact that my wife can quickly and wholeheartedly confirm to you. I have the spiritual gift of impatience. I choose stores that have self-checkout. I don't go to gas stations that have lines. I don't like waiting for the shower water to warm up or cool down. I really, really need this message. And all week I've been looking forward to as to what I'm going to tell myself. And you can listen in as well if you'd like. Lewis Smedes wrote these words: "Waiting is our destiny. We wait in fear for a happy ending we cannot write. We wait for a not yet that feels like a not ever. Waiting is the hardest work of hope." Throughout the Bible, we find that uncomfortable four-letter word, wait. Recently, I counted about 150 times where the word wait or waiting is mentioned in the pages of the Bible. 43 times in the Old Testament, God's people are told to wait. And here's just a very short sampling of that. Psalm 33, we wait for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. 37, be still in the presence of the Lord and wait patiently for him to act. Wait for the Lord and wait patiently for him to act. Blessed are those who wait for him. When it comes to waiting on God, the question we all pose is why? If God is so powerful and loves us so much, why doesn't he bring us relief and answers now? Well, the Bible tells us that we wait so God can use that waiting room for your good. God's number one goal, friends, is really not to make you happy. I mean, he likes that. He does. But his number one goal for you is to make you more like Jesus. To be the very best person you can be. And that's the best way to live, isn't it? One of our Creator's most effective life sharpeners is the uncomfortable waiting room. But you ask, what are the benefits that could possibly come from waiting? Let me offer just two. First one, waiting reminds you that you are not in control. When you visit a doctor, the first stop is the waiting room, testing the patients as to their patient quotient. It's in the waiting room that reminds us that we are not in control, that I am not calling the shots, that I am not running the show, that the timing is not up to me, that I am not the small g God of my life. It's in the waiting room. Sometimes we need to be reminded that we are not small g gods, that we cannot control everything, despite our best attempts to do otherwise. If I were to ask you the spiritual disciplines or habits that bring you closer to God, you might mention things such as Bible study, prayer, meditation, serving, worship, silence, compassion, confession, being a part of a church. But another spiritual discipline that might surprise you as to how God shapes us into the shape of His Son is that uncomfortable waiting room. God reminding us again, you are not in control. In his classic book, Philip Yancey, the book being Disappointed with God, wrote these words: waiting is a period of learning. The longer we wait, the more we learn about Him for whom we are waiting. Waiting may be the greatest teacher and trainer in godliness, maturity, and genuine spirituality most of us will ever encounter. Any chance that God has you in your current waiting room to remind you again that you are not the small g God of your life, because we keep forgetting that, don't we? Okay, second benefit of waiting. What God does in you while you wait is just as important as what you are waiting for. Ben Patterson wrote, waiting is not just something we have to do until we get what we want. Waiting is part of the process of becoming what God wants us to be. Contrary to popular opinion, God is not a vending machine where you drop in a few prayers and expect immediate results. Think about all the men and the women in the Bible whom we admire. They all had to wait. Can I rattle them off real quickly, just some of them? Abraham had to wait 24 years before God promised that promised son. Noah had to wait 120 years before it even started to rain. Joseph had to wait in prison for 13 years before he was released to bring his family back together again. God told his people that He would free them from Egyptian bondage, but first they would only have to wait for 400 years. David had to wait for King Saul to die before he could take over the throne. Job had to wait in a puddle of confusion and anger before God finally told him the reason why he had lost everything. The disciples had to wait for the coming of the Holy Spirit before they could begin their ministry. The father of the prodigal son had to wait before his son finally came home. After Peter denied Jesus died, he had to wait in the spin cycle of inconsolable grief until several days later when Jesus finally forgave him. When Paul asked God to remove the thorn in his flesh, God basically said, wait. John had to wait for the vision that would become the book of Revelation. Even Jesus knew what it was like to wait. He waited for just the right time to come to earth to show us His love. He had to wait 30 more years before he could begin his public ministry. And after his resurrection, he had to wait another 40 days before he could rightfully assume his place next to the Father. And today he's waiting again for just the right time to come down and restore our broken world. Friends, just who are we to think that we can become all that God wants us to become without sitting in some uncomfortable waiting rooms along the path of your life? Too often, we want God's resources, but we don't want His timing. We want His hand, but we don't want His calendar. We forget that His work in us while we wait is just as important as what we're waiting for. Faith means that I trust that God knows what He is doing while I wait. Henry Nouwen, in his book Sabbatical Journeys, recounts the story of a trapeze artist. And that trapeze artist told Nouwen that there's a special relationship between the flyer and the catcher. The flyer is the one who lets go, and the catcher is the one who snatches them out of the air. And when the flyer is swinging high above the crowd, the moment comes when they must let go. And as they arc out into the air, their job is to remain as still as possible and wait for the strong hands of the catcher to pluck them out of the air. The trapeze artist told Nowen that the flyer must never try to catch the catcher. Instead, the flyer must wait in absolute trust that the catcher will catch them. They just need to wait before good things happen. Can you recall the time when, after waiting for God, He came through for you? I hope you can. It may not have been on your timetable, but He still caught you. Isaiah 40, those who wait upon the Lord will find new strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint.